You're about to be an aunt. The baby is your fiancé's. Sloane rubbed her belly in slow circles. The string trio stopped mid-bar. Mom raised her champagne flute and said, "That makes us closer than ever." Dad steadied Sloane by the elbow like she was a soap bubble about to drift apart. I didn't make a scene. I lifted my own glass to my lips. Cold mineral water. I'd switched out the champagne an hour earlier. The bubbles tasted like nothing. Across the room, Adrian set his phone down on the silk-draped table. He set his glass next to it. He said very quietly, "Then why did you write 12 weeks?" Sloane's face went the color of the lavender pinned to her dress. I'd had 3 weeks of proof. I just needed her to say it first. If this story is already hitting you in the chest, please take a second to like and subscribe. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world you're listening from. I'm Lila, 31, an OBGYN nurse practitioner from Asheville, North Carolina. What you just heard was the moment my family thought I'd swallow like every other lie. Let me take you back 14 years, to the first time my mother told me my sister was made of glass. I bought the house in Montford, the spring before Adrian and I got engaged. A 1920s craftsman with original wide plank floors that creaked exactly the way old houses are supposed to creak. Lavender lined the path. The mailbox was crooked when I moved in, and I never fixed it because I liked the way it tilted toward the morning sun. Adrian moved his books in over a single weekend in January 2025. 3 boxes: finance, philosophy, and a sealed crate of his grandfather's woodworking magazines. He didn't ask which shelves were his. He started with the bottom right corner of the office and worked up. I noticed that. I noticed everything about him. We had met 4 years earlier at a wealth management seminar in Charlotte. He was the speaker. I was the only person in the room asking questions that had nothing to do with money. After the panel, he caught up with me by the coffee station and said, "You're not a financial planner." I said, "No, I empty IV bags for a living." He laughed in the way men laugh when they've decided to remember a moment. And 3 months later, we were eating tacos outside Asheville, and he was telling me about his mother's herb garden in Ohio. Adrian proposed on Christmas Eve 2024. He didn't do the kneeling thing. He held both my hands at the kitchen counter of his old apartment and asked, "Lila, do you want to do this for the rest of it?" I said, "Yes." We ate cold pasta from a takeout box afterward, and he put the ring in my palm because his hands were shaking too hard to slide it on. I told my parents at brunch the next morning. Dad, Vincent, set his fork down very carefully and stood up to hug me. He smelled like aftershave and the smoke from his sporting goods stockroom. He held me half a beat too long. He whispered, "I'm so happy for you," and his voice was thick. Mom, Trudy, smiled with her mouth. Her eyes were dry. She said, "How lovely. We'll have to plan." She stirred her coffee 3 times in a row. Sloane, my younger sister, 26, who still lived in the house I'd grown up in, went upstairs and closed her door. She didn't come down again until we'd left. Mom called me an hour later. "She just needs time, Lila. You know how she gets." I knew how Mom said it. That was the thing I didn't yet know. That evening, Adrian and I drove back to Asheville. He pulled over at a gas station off I-40 and said, "Your dad almost said something to me on the porch. "Did you see?" I hadn't. I said, "What?" Adrian said, "I don't know. It looked like he was about to apologize." I told him he was reading too much into it. I told him Dad was just emotional. We pulled back onto the highway and put on a Brandy Carlisle album, and I forgot about it for 14 months. I shouldn't have forgotten. I want to give you the shape of my family before I give you the shape of the betrayal, because the betrayal doesn't make sense without the shape. My mother is the architect of a single lifelong sentence. Sloan is fragile. My father is the man who never finished a sentence in his life. My sister is the recipient of every accommodation we ever made. Every birthday, I let her blow out my candles. Every science fair where I built her project, and she handed it in. Every Christmas where I wore the dress Mom said would look better on Sloan. I learned early to be granite, to carry weight without complaint, to be the one who didn't need anything because needing anything would mean someone else got less. I never resented it. That's the part I want you to hear. I never resented it. That was looking back my entire mistake. I want to take you back further, to the first time I knew, in the kid-knowing way, that my mother had picked a winner. I was 12. Sloan was 8. We had built different projects for the regional science fair. Mine on capillary action with strips of paper towel and food coloring. Hers on a homemade lava lamp that was mostly oil, water, and Alka-Seltzer that she didn't understand. Hers won her grade. Mine took third in mine. My poster had hand-drawn capillaries in red marker because the printer was broken that month, and I'd stayed up 2 nights to do it. The night before the fair, Sloan lost the lid to her water bottle lava lamp. She came into my room at 10 o'clock at night, eyes huge and wet, holding the lidless bottle. "Lila!" "I can't find it." I gave her my own lid. Same brand. I taped on the label she'd made. The next morning at the science fair, the lid leaked. 2 judges had to wipe oil off their hands. Mom found me at the snack table during judging and said, in a voice I can still hear, "Lila Marie, why would you sabotage your sister?" I said, "Mom, I gave her my lid." Mom said, "Sloan says you switched it. She says you took hers and gave her a leaky one because you were jealous." I was 12. I didn't know how to argue with a woman who had already chosen what was true. That afternoon, she made me kneel on the linoleum in front of the dinner table for 20 minutes, what she called thinking time. But it was always knees on linoleum time, while she explained to the family that I needed to learn to love my sister. Dad set his napkin down beside his plate. He didn't pick it back up. He stood, walked into the garage, and stayed out there for the rest of dinner. He didn't say a word for me. That was the first night I figured out that staying silent in my house was a vote. Years later, May of 2017, Sloan was 18. She got her rejection letter from Vanderbilt on a Tuesday. By Friday, she had taken a paring knife to the inside of her left wrist. 2 long, shallow cuts. She didn't lose much blood. The wounds closed in 3 weeks. What didn't close was Mom's grip on the story. For 9 years, every birthday, every holiday, every job change Sloan couldn't keep, Mom invoked that wrist. "Don't push her, Lila. She's not as strong as you. You don't know how close we came." I watched the scar fade. I watched Mom polish it like a piece of family silver. I watched her use it to forbid every uncomfortable conversation Sloan should have had with the world. I never said this out loud, But I started watching Sloane's wrists when she came down for breakfast, and I noticed the scar had faded years before Mom let it. By the time I graduated from the nurse practitioner program in May of 2019, I had learned to expect the choreography. I scheduled my graduation ceremony for a Saturday in Asheville. I sent the invitations in February. I called Mom in April to confirm. She said, "Of course we'll be there, sweetheart." The morning of my graduation, Sloane had a panic episode. She locked herself in the bathroom, breathing fast, refusing to come out. Mom called me at 9:15. I was already in my gown in line with the other graduates. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. We can't leave her." "You understand." I said, "I understand." I marched without my family in the front row. At 11 o'clock, my cousin Riley walked in with her father, Uncle Wallace, my dad's older brother. They'd left Charlotte at 6 in the morning. Wallace was wearing the only suit he owned, the navy one he'd bought in 1986. Riley was 23, in her last year of communication school, and she'd brought a printed program with my name highlighted in yellow. She found me in the lobby afterward and grabbed my shoulders and said, "Lila, I came for you. Not for the system they built, just for you." That was the day I learned what the difference was. That night, after everyone had gone home, Dad called me twice. He didn't leave a voicemail either time. I sat on the edge of my hotel bed at the DoubleTree and watched his name light up and go dark. I didn't pick up. I told myself it was because I was tired. I told myself I'd call him back the next morning. I never did. He never called again. I learned around the time I turned 25 to become Granite. Granite doesn't complain. Granite doesn't ask. Granite holds the weight of whatever's piled on top of it, because that's what granite was made for. My mother spent 14 years calling my sister Glass. I never doubted that glass could cut someone. I just never imagined the glass was going to be lifted very carefully and aimed at me. When I moved to Asheville in 2019, the summer after the graduation no one came to, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would visit Knoxville less. Not from anger, from self-preservation. Once a month became once a quarter. Once a quarter became once a year. I sent Dad a card on his birthday and his Father's Day and Christmas. He framed all three on the windowsill of his office at Hartwell Outfitters, his sporting goods chain. Mom mailed me a calendar each January with all the family birthdays marked in red, and a little note, "We miss you, sweetheart." I always called on the birthdays. I never went to the parties. Sloane drifted through 3 jobs in those years: receptionist at a chiropractor, assistant at a yoga studio, marketing intern at a furniture warehouse. She quit each one within 8 months. Mom called every quit a fresh start. Dad called none of them anything. In June of 2024, Sloane started a coordinator role at Whitcomb and Mead, a high-end interior design firm in downtown Knoxville. Mom called me breathless. "She loves it, Lila. She really loves it." I said I was glad. I was glad. I was tired of being suspicious of every good thing my sister might have. In December 2024, Adrian proposed. The morning after I told my parents, Sloane texted me. The first text from her in 11 months. 3 words. "Congratulations, sister, soon." 3 words. I stared at my phone for a long time. I sent back a heart emoji. She didn't reply. In January 2025, on a Tuesday afternoon, Sloan drove the 3 hours from Knoxville to Asheville without telling me. She rang the bell at 4 in the afternoon. I was on shift, but Adrian was working from home. He let her in. He texted me at the hospital. "Your sister is here. Should I be worried?" I said, "No, just feed her something." When I got home at 7, Sloan had her shoes off and was sitting cross-legged on the wool rug in our living room. She was running her hand along the marble seam of the coffee table. "This is beautiful," she said. "Where did you get it?" I said the name of the salvage place in West Asheville. She nodded slowly. She asked about the watch on Adrian's wrist. What brand? What year? She asked if he traveled for work. I said, "Sometimes." She asked how often, how far, how long. I said, "Sloan, why?" She smiled. "Just curious. You don't talk about your life with us anymore." I let her stay for dinner. I made a salad. Adrian made pasta. Sloan drank 2 glasses of wine and laughed at things that weren't quite the joke. She left at 9, hugged me at the door, and said, "I'm so happy for you, Lila. Really, I want to be the kind of sister you can call." I stood at the window and watched her car pull out of the driveway. In the kitchen, on the counter, open, was Adrian's calendar, the one I usually kept on the small desk in the office, the one with his Lisbon contract dates, highlighted in yellow. 3 months in Portugal, January through March. I didn't remember leaving it on the counter. I thought about it for 10 seconds. I closed the calendar. I put it back in the office. I told myself Adrian must have moved it during dinner to check something, to add to it. I did not ask him. I forgot about it within a week. That, looking back, was the second mistake. Not asking. Not getting suspicious of a woman who had spent 26 years getting exactly what she wanted by smiling in the right direction. You should know, by the way, that I am telling you this in chronological order on purpose. Not because the chronology is dramatic. It is. But that's not why. I'm telling you in order so you can feel it the way I felt it, slow underwater, with the sound of warning bells in the next room that I kept telling myself were just the pipes. Through the first half of 2025, Sloan was, by every measure my mother gave me, wonderful. Sloan is glowing. Sloan is up for a promotion. Sloan is staying late at the office, Lila. Isn't that a switch? In April 2025, Sloan sent me a selfie from a coffee shop. She was sitting across from a man. Older, salt and pepper hair, expensive watch, a navy suit jacket folded over the back of his chair. She had cropped his face out. The caption said, "New mentor, helping me grow up." I sent back a thumbs up. I did not enlarge the photo. I did not ask his name. That was Damian Hollister. I would not know that for 14 more months. By then, the lavender at the atrium would already be wilting in florist coolers, and my mother would already be polishing the toast she'd memorized for my engagement party. In February of 2026, Adrian flew to Lisbon for a 12-week fintech contract, a partnership with Banco BPI that had been on his calendar for 9 months. He left on January 3rd on the early flight out of Atlanta. He texted me from the gate. He texted me from the hotel. He video called me every night at 7 my time, 11 his. We were used to distance. We did not panic. In the 5th week, early February, my mother called me at 6 in the evening. I picked up while I was chopping garlic. "Lila," she said. Her voice was new. I waited. Sweetheart, your sister is going through something. I need you to be gentle with her. I put the knife down. Mom, has something happened? It's not, it's nothing specific. Just please be gentle. Don't ask too many questions if she calls. Don't push, sweetheart. I said, Mom, how old is she? There was a silence on her end the size of a room. 26, she said. Then maybe she can answer her own questions about what's happening to her. Mom hung up. She didn't slam it. She just disengaged. The way she had done 7,000 times in my life when I said something she couldn't argue with. That was the first wrong note. I almost missed it. I almost let it pass. I texted Adrian about it that night, and he said, "Strange. Stay calm. We'll see what comes." In late February, I drove to Knoxville with a birthday present for Dad, his 61st. I brought him a bottle of the bourbon his older brother liked, and a leather notebook from a maker in Asheville. I stopped by the house on a Saturday morning. Mom was at a board luncheon. Sloane was in the kitchen. She was wearing a beige tunic that hung straight from her shoulders. It didn't fit her. Sloane never wore clothes that didn't fit her. She looked up from her cereal as I came in. She smiled, and the smile was new too. It wasn't fragile, it wasn't sweet. It was a smile a chess player makes when she's already seen the next 4 moves. "Hey sis," she said. I gave her a hug. She felt thinner under the tunic than the tunic suggested. I gave Dad the bourbon in the garage. He hugged me. He said very quietly, "Thank you, sweetheart." He held my shoulders an extra second. He almost said something else. He looked at the floor. He let me go. I left at 1. Dad walked me to the car. He held the door for me. He stood in the driveway, his hands in his pockets, watching me back out. When I waved, he raised his hand. The hand stayed in the air a moment too long, like he had wanted to gesture more and had stopped himself. I drove home. I did not call Adrian about the look on Dad's face. I told myself I was reading into things. On the 19th of March, I was on shift, charting at the OB triage station. My phone vibrated. Instagram DM from someone I didn't recognize. Margot Hollister. Profile: blonde, mid-40s, dermatology clinic in Charlotte. 2 daughters in tagged photos. 3 sentences. "Sorry to reach out like this. I think we need to talk about your sister and my husband. If you're willing, I will come to wherever you are. Margot." I read it 4 times. The unit clerk asked me if I was okay. I said yes, I'd just gotten a strange spam message. I logged out of the chart. I walked to the staff bathroom. I locked the door. I called Adrian. He picked up on the second ring. It was midnight in Lisbon. He had not been asleep. I read him the message. He was silent for 16 seconds. I counted. He said very quietly, "Lila, do not react. Do not change anything about how you talk to your mom. Do not text Sloane. Do not post anything online. We are going to take 3 days to think before we do anything." I said, "Adrian, the text, the Instagram message. It's not nothing, is it?" He said, "No, love, it's not." I drove home that night with both hands on the steering wheel and my eyes too dry to blink. I called Riley before I'd even pulled into the driveway. I said, "Riley, something is happening. I don't know what yet. Can you come up?" She said, "I'm leaving Charlotte at 7 tomorrow morning." Over the next 11 days, I called my mother 4 separate times. I asked about the menu for the engagement party. I asked her if she liked the florist's mock-up. I asked her how Sloane was doing. Each time I called, my mother dropped a different piece of the same prepared story. Sloane is taking a leave of absence. Sloane has been sick to her stomach for weeks. Sloane is making peace with some big news she'll want to share. Sloane is so grateful you've been kind, Lila. Each piece was a different facet of the same gem. She was holding it up to the light to see how it caught. I kept my voice steady. I kept calling her mom. I called her mom every single one of those 4 times. We pretended I didn't know she was lying. She pretended I didn't notice. We called that being family. On the 22nd of March, a Sunday, Riley and I drove from Asheville to Charlotte. We were meeting Margot Hollister at a coffee place called Brewster's, 2 blocks from her dermatology clinic. It was a warm spring morning. Riley wore a denim jacket I'd bought her for Christmas 3 years ago. We didn't talk much in the car. We got there 15 minutes early. We sat at a corner table by the window. Riley ordered a flat white. I ordered nothing. Margot walked in at 9:43. I knew her by the dermatology bag over her shoulder. She wasn't dressed up. Gray cashmere cardigan, jeans, low boots. No makeup that I could see. She walked over and slid into the chair across from me. "You're Lila," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. She looked at Riley. Riley said, "I'm her cousin, don't worry about me." Margot nodded. She set her phone face down on the table. She folded her hands on top of it. She looked at me with the kind of tired, level eyes I'd seen on women in the second trimester of an unwanted pregnancy. Not hostile, not soft. Decided. "I want you to know something first," Margot said. "I'm not here for revenge. I have 2 daughters. They will not benefit from a war. I am here because I think you deserve to know what your sister has been planning, and because, frankly, my husband cannot be trusted to keep his end of it quiet." I said, "Tell me what you know." She turned her phone over. She opened her messaging app. She scrolled slowly. She turned the phone to face me. A text from a number labeled in her phone as Damien, cell, dated February 12th, 9:43 p.m. The text was long. The text said, "D, I'm 12 weeks Saturday. The engagement party is the 4th. I'm going to tell them at the party that the baby is Adrian's. Your wife will be the smallest problem you have by Monday. Don't do anything stupid before then. S." I read it once. I read it twice. I looked up at Margot. I looked back down at the phone. I read it a 3rd time. I set Margot's phone gently back on the table. I didn't cry. I didn't move. Riley reached across and put her hand on my forearm. Her hand was warm. Mine had gone cold. "How did you find it?" I asked. Margot said, "Last weekend I logged into our shared iPad. I was looking at the girls' summer camp options. WhatsApp Web was still signed in from his work account. I scrolled, by accident, into a thread he hadn't archived. I found this and 40 other messages. I screenshotted everything. I confronted him last Thursday. He admitted the affair. He insisted the pregnancy was nothing, quote, A bluff she's using to keep me at the table. I told him I would handle this however I chose. I'm choosing this. Riley said, "Have you contacted Sloan?" "No," Margot said. "I have not contacted Sloan. I will not unless Lila wants me to." I said, "I need a minute." I walked outside. I stood under the awning. I called Adrian. It was 3 in the afternoon there. He picked up on the first ring. "Lila, what is it?" "She wrote it down," I said. "She wrote 12-week Saturday. She wrote, 'Your wife will be the smallest problem.' Adrian." She wrote it down. He was silent. I heard him exhale. "Put me on speaker when you go back in," he said. "We're going to figure this out together. Right now." I went back in. I put Adrian on speaker. Riley moved her chair closer. Margot folded her hands again. Adrian said, "Margot, thank you. First, I'm not going to react until Lila chooses. Second, what I'd recommend is that we let her say it. Let her stand up in front of 60 people and say everything she has prepared. Don't cut her off. Don't intercept her. When she finishes, I'll be the one who replies, and I'll do it with the receipts. If we cut her off first, my mother-in-law gets to spin the story for the next 30 years. If we let her finish, there's no spinning." Margot said, "I agree." Riley said, "Lila, are you with this?" I said, "Yes." Margot said, "I'll come. I'll wait for a text from your cousin to come in. I'll not say anything until Sloan says her piece." I said, "I want you to walk in after Adrian's first response, not before. I want her to say it. I want my mother to toast it. I want my father to steady her. I want the whole choreography. Then I want you to walk in." Margot nodded. She looked at Riley. "Get me an address and a time." We drove back to Asheville in silence again. The Blue Ridge was hazy. The dogwoods were just starting. Riley turned to me at one point, somewhere past Hickory, and said, "Lila, you are allowed to cry." I said, "Not yet." She nodded. She kept driving. "Look, if you're listening to this, and you're trying to figure out whether my sister was the architect of her own scheme or just the loudspeaker for my mother's, here's where I want to ask you for your guess. Drop a comment below. Do you think Sloan wrote that text on her own? Or do you think she was reading off my mother's draft? I'll tell you my answer in the last act. I want to hear yours first." When we got back to my house, Riley walked through the front door and put both hands on the kitchen counter and said one sentence, not facing me. 11 days, she said. "We have 11 days to be perfect." In those 11 days, I did not change anything I had done before. I called my mother on Tuesday to ask about the seating chart. I called her on Thursday to ask about the menu. I called her on Saturday to ask if the florist needed final confirmation. Each time she stayed on the phone with me for longer than she needed to. Each time she would drift, almost casually, into, "And oh, your sister, she has something she wants to share with you, with everyone, at the party. She's been waiting." I said, "How exciting." I said, "Oh, lovely." I said, "Of course, Mom." When I hung up the third time, I sat on the floor of my bathroom for 9 minutes and breathed. Adrian, in Lisbon, worked nights and slept little. He pulled together what he called the receipts file. He scanned both pages of his passport with the Schengen stamps. He requested an itemized print of his hotel keycard activity from the Pastana Palace, The front desk emailed it to him within 2 hours, marked confidential, guest records. He pulled 6 weeks of his company VPN access logs with the IP geolocations. He pulled emails from his client at Banco BPI. He pulled photos from his work calendar. Every Monday morning stand-up with his Lisbon team in the background. Time stamped. Date stamped. Witness rich. He sent everything to me. He sent everything to Riley. He sent encrypted copies to a private cloud folder and printed 2 physical sets, one to keep at his home in Asheville, one to keep with Riley at her apartment in Charlotte. Riley took over what she called the operations. Riley was a crisis communications consultant for a mid-sized firm. She had spent 5 years preparing CEOs to walk through their worst public moments. She made me a list. The list was 3 lines long. 1. Do not change your voice when you call your mother. 2. Do not see Sloan alone before the party. 3. Do not post anything to social media. Not a smile, not a flower, not an emoji. I followed all 3. The mask set. On the 25th of March, a Wednesday, my father drove from Knoxville to Asheville without warning. He texted me at 11:43 in the morning. Coming through, Lila. Got an hour or 2. Mind if I drop by? I said, of course, Dad. He arrived at 1:15. He parked the outfitter's truck on the street even though my driveway was empty. He took off his shoes at the door. He never used to. And he came into the kitchen and stood for a moment looking at the salt and pepper shakers on the counter. I made coffee. He sat at the kitchen island in the chair Adrian usually sat in. He spoke first about a soccer game he'd watched the night before. Then about a vendor who was trying to push him on new running shoes for the spring line at his sporting goods stores. Then about the dogwoods outside the front window. Then about a man at his church he hadn't seen since November. For 90 minutes he avoided every subject that mattered. At 91 minutes, I remember the clock. It was 12 after 2. He set his coffee mug down. He looked at the ring of moisture it had left on the counter. He drew a circle around the ring with his index finger. He said, Lila, if something ever feels off to you about anyone in our family, I want you to check it carefully before you decide what to believe. All of it. Check all of it. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. I said, Dad, what are you trying to tell me? He held my eyes for half a second. He smiled slowly. The smile was an apology. He shook his head. He said, I just love you, that's all. I just love you. Don't believe anyone over yourself. He stood up. He hugged me. He let go. He walked out to his truck. He drove away without looking back. I stood on the front porch with one hand on the column and watched his taillights pull out of view. I went back inside. I called Riley. I told her exactly what he had said, exactly the way he had said it. Riley was quiet for a long time. She said, Lila, I think your dad knows. Not all of it, but enough. And I think he's too scared of your mother to come at this head on. He is, in his own way, knocking on the door. I said, should I call him back? She said, not yet. Let him bring it the rest of the way. If he doesn't, we deal with it after Saturday. On the 28th, 3 days before the party, Adrian flew into Charlotte. He drove straight to Asheville. He walked through the front door at 7:12 in the evening. He hugged me at the threshold for 43 seconds. I counted. Riley made coffee. The three of us sat at the kitchen table until almost midnight, sketching the floor plan of the atrium on a sheet of butcher paper, marking the door Margot would enter through, the angle of the AV booth, the seat at the head table where Sloane would inevitably stand. When Adrian and I finally went to bed, I lay on my back staring at the ceiling, and I did not sleep. I thought, I am not preparing to disrupt a party. I am preparing for the first time in 14 years to speak honestly in front of my mother. I thought, only one of those things has to happen with witnesses. I thought, tomorrow Riley starts running the door. On Wednesday, April 1st, I woke up at 5:43 in the morning. I do not know why I checked my email before I got out of bed. I do that maybe twice a year. But I did that morning. Subject line Saturday. Sender, friend of yours at protonmail.com. No body. 11 attachments. PDFs. I opened the first one. It was a screenshot of Sloane's Visa credit card statement for the month of March, with the cardholder name and last 4 digits blacked out by a thick black Sharpie marker. The kind you'd use if you were photographing a printout, not editing the PDF. Wandering Mama, Knoxville, $389.40. March 8th, I knew Wandering Mama. There was one in Asheville, too. High-end maternity boutique, linen tunics, soft draped dresses for women in their second trimester. I opened the second attachment, February statement. 2 more line items. fakeultrasound-bump.com, $74.99. February 19th. fakeultrasound-bump.com, $42.50. February 21st. I opened the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th. I scrolled through 11 months of my sister's credit card records. Maternity boutique, online prosthetic kit. A second prosthetic kit, larger size. A flower shop order for a hand-painted ultrasound photograph. A custom personalized ultrasound, $89. I closed my laptop. I put my forehead on the cold metal lid for a moment. I opened it again. I called Riley. I read her the line items. She was driving. She pulled over. She said, "Who sent it?" I said, "I don't know. The username is bizarre, friend of yours. Run together, friend of yours." Like it was typed in a panic. Riley said, "Was it Margot?" Margot had no access to Sloane's credit cards. Margot had Damien's texts. That's it. Riley was silent for a beat. She said, "Lila, I think it's your dad." I said, "How would Dad have her statements?" Riley said, "She lives in his house. She uses his Wi-Fi. She might have left the bank app open on a shared iPad once. Or Vincent has been the one who pays for her car. He might be on her account as authorized user. Lila, I think your dad has known for weeks. And I think this is the most he could do." I sat very still. I forwarded the email to Adrian. He called me back 22 minutes later. He said, "Lila, listen carefully. This is what the prosthetic kit is for. Sloane is 12 weeks pregnant. At 12 weeks, she is not visibly showing. Not from across a room. Not in a tailored dress. For the announcement to land, for the visual to lock people into believing the baby is real and the timeline is real, she needed to look more pregnant than she is. The kit is for show. To stand up at the head table and turn her hip and look 15, 16 weeks along. She's playing to the cheap seats. The pregnancy is real. The performance is fake. I said, and the ultrasound photo? He said, back up. In case she had to wave it around so nobody could ask which clinic. Custom printed. Her own face on it, in case anyone asked to see. I said, Adrian, this is a whole production. He said, yes. And we have one more variable to handle. She's going to assume nothing has gone wrong. She's going to walk in believing your mother has cleared the runway. Don't take that away from her before she takes the microphone. Let her think she's winning. Let her toast herself. That night, my mother called me at 7:15. I picked up while I was rinsing arugula in the colander. Lila, sweetheart, she said. She sounded almost giddy. I just wanted to tell you. Wear the ivory dress on Saturday. I think it's going to be a beautiful evening. I've chosen lavender for Sloane. She wants to look, well, you'll see. She wants to look special. I said, of course, Mom. I'll wear the ivory. I said, I can't wait to see her. There was a moment of silence on her end. Just a moment, a small, surprised inhalation. My mother had expected me to sound dry. I had sounded sincere. I heard her smile through the phone. It was the smile she used when she had already counted the votes. I knew you'd come around, sweetheart. I always did. She hung up. I held the phone in my hand for a long time. The colander dripped onto my bare foot. I didn't move. I thought 3 days. I thought 3 days, Mom. I thought, I love you. And I will not let you do this to me again. The atrium sits in a renovated 19th century warehouse in downtown Asheville, 3 blocks from Pack Square. Brick walls, 20-foot beams, a wall of windows that face the mountains, 50 round tables, and a curved riser at the south end. Adrian and I had booked it 8 months earlier. Riley had called the events manager 3 times in 3 days to confirm the AV setup. We had paid extra for a videographer, a still photographer, and a backup AV technician named Connor, who had agreed on a phone call 2 days before the party to drop one specific slide deck on the main screen the moment Adrian made eye contact and tapped twice on his glass. We arrived at 6:34 in the evening. I wore the ivory dress my mother had chosen for me. Adrian wore a dark charcoal suit and the watch his grandfather had left him. Riley wore navy and stood near the catering door with one earpiece in. Margot was parked in a rental 2 blocks east on Patton Avenue. Her phone was on the passenger seat. The volume was up. Guests arrived in waves. Adrian's parents flew in from Cincinnati. His sister and her husband from Nashville. My Uncle Wallace and his wife Sandra from Charlotte. Cousins, college friends, hospital colleagues. The director of my unit at Mountain Bridge. 61 people total. My parents arrived at 6:58. Sloane was with them. Sloane wore a pale lavender wrap dress that draped at the hip. The drape sat in a way that suggested a curve, soft, gentle, just enough that an observer would lock onto it. She had on the prosthetic kit. I knew it immediately. The angle was slightly too even. She'd practiced it in the bathroom mirror, but a real 12-week belly is asymmetrical. Hers was perfectly round. She walked toward us with a small, careful smile. She hugged me. She whispered into my ear, "Lila, I'm so happy for you." I said, "Thank you, Sloan." I let her hold me. I let her think I'd let my guard down. I watched my mother across her shoulder. My mother watched me back. We smiled at each other. We took the head table. Vincent on Trudy's right, Sloan on Trudy's left, then me, then Adrian, then Riley at the corner. The string trio played Debussy at the back of the room. Servers poured. Conversation rolled. At 7-Eleven, Trudy lifted her champagne flute and tapped the side with a butter knife. The room hushed. Trudy stood. She smiled out at the crowd. "Friends, family, beloveds," she said. "We have so much to celebrate this evening. Adrian and Lila, what a journey." She raised her glass to us. And before the toasts begin, I wanted to give my younger daughter, Sloan, a moment. She has something to share with our family, with our extended family, with all of you. She turned. She nodded toward Sloan. Sloan stood up. She placed both hands, slowly, slowly, on her belly. She let them rest there. The room could see them. She drew breath. "I haven't known how to say this," she said. Her voice was a sigh, trained, slightly tearful. I didn't know if today was the right day, but I needed to share it with all of you because I want this baby to know from the very beginning that it was welcomed. A murmur in the room, glasses lowered. She turned. She looked across the table. She looked at Adrian. "You're about to be an aunt," she said to me. Her eyes were wet. "The baby is your fiancé's." The room, 61 people, held its breath at the same moment. Trudy lifted her flute high, loud, performative. "That makes us closer than ever," she said. Vincent placed his hand on Sloane's lower back. He did not look at her. He looked at the floor. His hand pressed her gently, the way you steady a soap bubble. I did not move. I lifted my own glass, sparkling water, to my lips. The bubbles tasted like nothing. Adrian set his champagne flute down on the silk runner. He set his phone next to it, face up. He hadn't been looking at it. He'd been using it as a placeholder for what he was about to do next. He stood up. He looked at Sloane. He spoke quietly. The whole room could hear because the whole room was silent. "Sloane," he said, "then why did you write 12 weeks? Sloane's smile thinned. "What?" Adrian said. 3 weeks ago, February 12th, 9:43 at night, you sent a text to Damian Hollister. You told him you'd be 12 weeks Saturday. You told him you were going to announce at your sister's engagement party. You told him his wife, and I'm quoting, would be the smallest problem he had by Monday. Why did you write that, Sloane?" I watched my mother's chest rise. I watched it not fall again. She had stopped breathing. Vincent stood very still. His hand was still on Sloane's lower back. He pulled it away. Slowly, he set it on the linen of the head table. "Sloane, I don't know what you..." Adrian tapped his glass twice with his ring finger. Across the room, at the AV booth, Connor leaned over his laptop. The screen above the riser came alive. Slide 1. Adrian's passport opened to the page with the Schengen entry stamp, Lisbon, Portugal, January 3rd, 2026. 11:14 a.m. local time. Slide 2. A printout from the Pestana Palace Lisboa. Keycard log. Adrian's room number. 86 consecutive days of entries. The last entry. March 29th, 6:42 a.m. Checkout. Slide 3. A tile of 14 VPN access entries. The IP geolocation column showing Lisbon PT beside every single line. Adrian said very evenly, "I have been in Portugal since January 3rd. I returned 6 days ago. Whatever this baby is, Sloane, it isn't mine." A small sound went through the room. Not a gasp. Something quieter. A weight sliding. Trudy, this is not... Adrian, this is not the time. Adrian, Trudy, you toasted 30 seconds ago. Sloane's hands, both, went up to her belly. She steadied herself against the table. She turned to my mother. Her face was the color of the lavender on her dress. She mouthed something at Trudy. "Mom, help." Trudy looked at Vincent. Vincent did not look back. The door at the back of the atrium opened. Margot Hollister walked in. Margot did not rush. She walked the length of the aisle between the tables, her gray cashmere cardigan over her shoulders, her dermatology bag over her left arm. She stopped one chair away from Sloane. "Hi, Sloane," she said. Sloane went absolutely still. Trudy said, "Excuse me, I'm sorry. Who are you, dear? This is a private..." Margot turned to her. Not warm, not unkind. Decided. "Trudy, I'm Margot Hollister. My husband Damien is Sloane's boss. He is parked outside this venue. He came to stop me from coming in. I told him I needed to speak with Sloane first." She turned back to Sloane. "May I?" She did not wait for permission. She lifted her phone from her bag. She thumbed it open. Up on the slide screen, the AV picked up her phone display. Connor was watching. Sloane's text in white on dark gray, blown up enormous behind her head. "D, I'm 12 weeks Saturday. The engagement party is the 4th. I'm going to tell them at the party that the baby is Adrian's. Your wife will be the smallest problem you have by Monday. Don't do anything stupid before then. S." Sloane sank into her chair, her hands still on her belly. The string trio stopped playing. No one had told them to. They just stopped. The door at the back opened again. Damien Hollister came through it. He was a man in his late 40s, salt and pepper hair, navy suit, no tie. He saw the slide screen. He saw his wife. He took 2 steps forward. "Sloane," he said, "don't say anything, don't..." Margot did not look at him. She said, "Damien, sit." He looked toward the door. Behind him, Ezra Calloway, Adrian's best friend, the man whose finance career began the same year Adrian's did, stood in front of the door. His hands were in his pockets. His expression was polite. He said, "I think you'd like to stay. I think this is going to matter to you." Damien froze. He took 1 step backward. He took 1 step sideways. He looked for an exit. There was no exit. There were 40 other guests with phones out and a videographer Adrian had paid for, and a still photographer whose finger had not left the shutter button. Damien sat down in an empty chair at the nearest table. He did not look up. Sloane began to cry. real crying, not the careful tear of the announcement, loose, ugly, panicked crying. The kind a child does when they realize that for the first time in their life, there is no parent who can fix this. "It was Damien's," she said. "I'm sorry, it was... Mom said Lila would understand. Mom said Adrian would be... Mom said Mom..." "Trudy, Sloan, don't..." Vincent, very quietly, almost to himself. "Trudy..." Trudy did not hear him. "Sloan, sweetheart, this isn't the place. We can talk about this at home." Vincent, louder. "Trudy..." Trudy turned to him. The full force of 14 years of "Sloan is fragile" was in her face. She was not used to being interrupted by Vincent. She had not been interrupted by Vincent at a family event in 20 years. Vincent's jaw worked. Vincent looked at me. He said, "Lila, I am so sorry. I am so deeply sorry." I did not answer him. "Trudy." "Vincent, not here, not in front of..." Vincent. "Trudy, enough." The two words landed in the room like a dropped tray. The room rang. Trudy's mouth opened. She did not speak. For perhaps the first time in my entire life, I watched my mother lose the room. She looked around. She looked at Sloan crying. She looked at Damien staring at the floor. She looked at Margot, standing very still. She looked at Adrian, who was looking only at me. She looked at me. I stood up. I walked around the head table. I stopped at the curved edge of the riser. I turned to face the 61 people who had come on a Saturday in April to celebrate Adrian and me, and who had instead watched my family rip itself open in their presence. I said very quietly, "I want to thank you all for being here. I want to say one thing. Then Adrian and I are going to leave." Sloan sobbed harder. I looked at her. I felt no satisfaction. I felt no triumph. I felt, slightly to my own surprise, a tired, distant pity, the kind a nurse feels for someone who has come into the emergency department because of a decision she could have avoided. I said, "Sloan, you will have this baby, or you will not, and the choice is yours, and it is between you and Damien, not between you and me, and not between you and any version of me you and our mother invented to make this easier for yourself." I turned to Trudy. Her mouth was closed now. "Mom, don't call me. Not on my birthday, not at Christmas, not on the day this baby is born. Don't call me until you can say out loud, without softening it, without excuses, without your hand on Sloan's back, what you just heard her say. And when you can say it that clean, call me. I will pick up. I will not promise anything else." I turned to Vincent. His shoulders were shaking, almost imperceptibly. His hands were flat on the head table. "Dad, I love you. I'll call you when I'm ready. It might be a while." He nodded. He did not look up. If you have ever had to teach your own mother that love is not what we built our family out of for 14 years, if you have ever had to draw a line at a dinner table or a Christmas table or, like me, at an engagement party head table, comment "I understand" below this video. I read them. I read every single one. You are not alone. I see you. I was you. Adrian came up behind me and put his hand on my back. Riley stepped to my other side and took the small clutch I had been holding. The three of us walked out of the atrium together. Margot touched the back of my arm as I went past her. She did not say anything. She did not need to. The doors closed behind us. In the parking lot, Adrian unlocked the car. Riley got in the back. I got in the passenger side. I closed my eyes. I leaned my head against the window. I did not cry. Not yet. For 3 weeks after that night, I did not speak to my mother. I did not speak to Sloan. I blocked both their numbers. I deleted the family group thread. Adrian and I went back to work. Riley drove home to Charlotte and sent me a text every morning for 14 days that just said, "Still here." The video from the engagement party reached people I had not seen in 8 years. A nurse I had trained beside in graduate school sent me a single line. "I had a mother like yours. I'm in your corner." A college friend I had lost touch with after her wedding sent me a long voice memo I listened to 3 times. The unit clerk who had asked if I was okay, back on the day Margot's DM arrived, left a covered casserole on my doorstep with a Post-it that just said, "Eat." I learned, over those 3 weeks, that the women who had been quietly watching me for years had been keeping account. I also learned what nobody tells you about cutting off a parent. The grief shows up first, before the relief. I cried for the mother I had wished I had. I did not cry for the one I had. Adrian held me through both. He was patient with the distinction, even though I was not always able to explain it out loud. On the 27th of April, Adrian forwarded me an email he had received at his personal address. The sender was Vincent Hartwell. The email was 4 paragraphs. He wrote that he had known since November about Sloan and Damien. He wrote that he had not known what to do. He wrote that he had been the sender of the credit card statements, that the Proton mail address had been the only way he could think to warn us without confronting Trudy first, which he had not been brave enough to do. He wrote that he was not asking for forgiveness. He was asking for permission to keep trying. I read it twice. I sat at the kitchen table. Then finally, 4 weeks late, I cried. Adrian held me. He did not say anything. I do not remember how long I cried. I remember that when I stopped, the dogwoods outside the kitchen window had bent slightly in a wind that had come up while we sat. On the 8th of August, Adrian and I were married at the Cliff House Inn at the edge of Acadia National Park in Maine. There were 12 guests. Uncle Wallace walked me down the aisle in the Navy suit he had bought in 1986. It did not fit him anymore, and he did not care. Riley stood as my maid of honor, in a sage green dress the color of eucalyptus. Vincent was not invited. I sent him a handwritten card the week before. I wrote, "When you are ready to say what you know, out loud in front of everyone, not in an email, I will listen. Until then, I love you from a distance." Adrian and I danced our first dance on a sanded oak floor with the ocean 200 yards away. He whispered something I did not entirely hear over the music. I laughed. It was not the laugh of someone who had been avenged. It was the laugh of a woman who had been carrying a bag since she was 12 years old and who, finally, had set it down. I am not granite. I never needed to be. My sister was never glass. My mother was never right. I love them. I love them from a long way away. That is the love I had left to give.